The
illustrious Jabba bids you welcome. I'm going to regret this.
I'm Pete Mitchell. He's Peyton Jones. And this is the Church Planter Podcast, brought to you by Church Planter Magazine.
Of grandeur. All right.
Hey, Church Planter. This is Pete Mitchell.
And this is Peyton Jones.
And what I was going to laugh about that I can't share the whole story on is I was like, you know what? Peyton's right. I got to tell that other story on the From Concealment podcast. I can totally tell it on the From Concealment podcast.
That's what, you know what, that's what I feel like that podcast really is it's like there's like this pressure release valve called the From Concealment podcast. And when you know I can't share that on the Church Planter podcast, as cool as our audience is, even Peyton's, I think that needs to go on the other one. That's just like it's a pressure release valve for you.
I'm just saying, I was like, you know what? I'm thinking in my head, Dan will find that hilarious. Perfect. There we go. So everyone's got to, like, when you're listening to this podcast on iTunes, head on over to From Concealment, because that one comes out the day we record it. So that's the day this gets published. Just listen From Concealment. Listen to the new episode.
And the Ministry Ninja. Hey, I gotta throw mine out there, right? Ministry Ninja podcast too, because it feels a little left out if you don't check it out. If you've never listened to Ministry Ninja podcast, that's where Barry, my whipping boy and multiple church plants, is on there, and Andrea, and I'm her whipping boy. So this is great. Come check it out.
So I got a question for you. Have you heard the latest hubbub about, Prince Harry and what he had to say about the First Amendment?
I've gone off news. Last week I was talking about the news, and all this week I've disciplined myself to not be on news, because it's actually been a rough week for me. I had to dig into my drywall. Found a valve. I have found all the plumber I fired. I am finding I didn't know what I didn't know. I'm finding out this week what I didn't know. Good buddy of mine from my youth group, which has been funny. We've been talking, we'll come back to Harry, but we've been talking about all this crazy stuff that we used to do when we were kids, high schoolers. And this guy was, I think at like 16, 17, he was touring up and down in a punk band. We had like the most radical youth group on the planet. And they were like people, my wife was always like, I always wondered what was wrong with you guys. I couldn't believe you guys were actually Christians. And not because we were doing anything weird, but we were just all a bunch of messed up kids. Mm. And, but we would go right up to the line of where something wasn't sinful. Like, we'd be careful. Like, we're not breaking the law here, but we're kicking out the jams big time. And, cause we were all kind of wild, and our youth pastor, we used to feel so sorry for him, and he was rad. Like, he was not in full-time ministry. He's a full-time furniture repairman. And, he had a bit of savvy about him. We interviewed him, and, he was just rad. He knew exactly how to handle us. And, but anyways, this guy's come over. He's like, hey, for a beer and some chats, I'll hook up your plumbing. I'll finish out. But he's been like AD knows what evil lurks in your plumbing. And, he's been fixing all the problems. So it's been crazy. Good news is I have no leaks in my entire house. I was a bit worried about that. But that said, man, it's been a rough week. So I turned off my news, because I figured I got enough of my own problems this week. I don't need any of the world's problems. Thank you very much. The doctor's out, right? Like Lucy on Charlie Brown. Doctor's not in this week. I'm out.
So I guess what Prince Harry was saying is, because, I don't really understand your First Amendment, just what Megan's been explaining to me, but it's bonkers. I'm like thinking to myself, the First Amendment, you think is bonkers? Like, I wonder, is that like, obviously, I was like, he's just messing up his amendments. Is he thinking about the Second Amendment? Because that I could see someone from the UK totally being like, that's a crazy amendment. Everyone has guns. That's absurd. But like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, is that a common thing in the UK? I know they don't have it.
So stop and think about it for a sec. Yeah, no, you definitely, it used to be in America that you used to be able to say just about anything. And now with cancel culture, that's changed. So even though our Constitution says one thing, this is, I would say it's an example of we are actually becoming more and more like Britain in the sense where, there is another set of rules. This has long been the case in Britain, but also they don't have the First Amendment.
No, they don't.
So you can.
They got people getting arrested for like liking tweets and for posting stuff on Facebook.
So hate crimes, you would be labeled if you're. Keep in mind they have a long history of terrorism. Right? Like the IRA, stuff like that. So, for them, like you're allowed to dissent against the government and people regularly do. So to me, it's largely about interpretation. So I love the First Amendment. I think the First Amendment's awesome, but does it absolutely protect us? No.
And that wasn't my point. I was just like, I wonder if coming from that society, like the thought of free speech, just seems pretty crazy to you.
Well, because yes and no. Like he would agree with the dissent against the government. He would agree, as he's modeled by his own life, speaking out against authority. What he's saying is what we actually believe. What we say is the ideal. It's not how it works in reality. So picture you're in Britain and you don't have that ideal of the First Amendment. What you have is the reality of you can't say things that are labeled as hate crimes, right? Like you could not say.
To me, that's a problem. That's a problem when you have someone who can label something as hate crime, because that's what we're starting to see in Canada. They're saying,
but we have that here too.
But we also have the protection. Like in Canada, they go, well, you can't speak out against homosexuality in the church because that's a hate crime.
Right.
I mean, they're not calling it hate crime, but that's basically what they're doing. And so
they haven't messed with the church.
No, they have. Absolutely. They
have. In Britain though.
In Britain, I don't know.
Yeah. You in Britain, they understand that there are, certain religious groups. I mean,
but my point is that's why I find it a huge problem where someone else gets to label what a hate crime is.
I think people don't realize, if not for Islam, the church probably long ago would have lost its ability to speak out on a lot of things, but Christians are considered soft targets. Muslims are not. So, the government doesn't want to take on Islam in Britain. So they don't go after the church over that issue, but the church is also careful, as they should be, about how they speak about those issues. I actually, I'm not a fan of cancel culture to a certain degree, but I also believe in accountability for what you say. And, I think that the fact that there's backlash for what people say is kind of cool. Like if someone says something racist, I'm glad they got to pay for it. I'm glad. I
would say to a degree, the part where I would disagree is, literally when we're looking back 20 years at what someone said in college and they're, 20 years, it's like, that's ridiculous to me. Now you're literally trying to attack a person because people change over time. Like I look at our podcast over 8 years and my views have changed over time.
Yeah.
Like you can go back and listen to all those episodes and be like,
well, even now, man, like there's a video intro that I have that for Church Planning Ninja, which I don't use anymore. But there's one where it's got like a kung fu noise in it. And recently with the people hating on Asians, I was like, I'm not going to use that anymore, because although it was rad before, like this wave of Asian hate, right now I hear it differently, and I don't mean anything by it. I love kung fu films. I think ninjas are rad, but I have to stop and go, okay, me. I mean, most of the time I don't give a rip. Like I've had people pick on me for stuff and I'll fight them on stuff, But on that, I'm like, you know what? I have people I care about that are Asian. The sensitivity is different because the behavior towards Asians has been different. And I'm now sensitive about this, and I don't want in any way to contribute to any pain. And I think, like you said, you and I will look back on our own podcast differently. And there's been times I think, gosh, probably our old podcasts need to be edited. When we started, man, we laughed at everything under the sun, and in the last 8-9 years, people become so sensitive that there are two issues. There's the issue of like a Gen Xer, like get over yourself. And then there's the other issue of, well, also too, like racism is the hot topic. And now, like Gran Torino, right? The film where Clint Eastwood,
right,
just bags. He almost makes fun of an ignorant. It's kind of what he's doing. He's making fun of an ignorant, old timer who just doesn't understand any cultural sensitivity, and he rips on everything. Now, I saw that in a theater I saw it in Westminster Garden Grove, and I was one of the few white people in the theater when I saw it, and they were dying because he's making fun of everybody in that movie, and it was hilarious. But today, could that film be made? Probably not. But because it wasn't like aimed at one specific person, and as a white guy, it was kind of making fun of himself of how ignorant he was. It worked, he was actually more of the joke. And, but you actually could make that, because nowadays people would say, oh, we got to cancel Clint Eastwood for what he said in this movie, rather than understanding the nuance of the film, which was to show a guy who was racist, and he was clearly racist.
Right. He was, yeah.
To then watch his journey where he gets to know, I think were they Cambodian or
I don't even remember now. Yeah, all I remember is the car. Come on.
And he changes completely to the point where he'll give his life.
That, and I remember him going, he pulls out his finger and that's when he dies. Yeah, that was great.
Wait, you didn't just say that he gave birth to himself, to everyone who's not seen it.
Dude, I'm telling you, I want to go back and rewatch that. I was explaining that movie on, I run this Detailer Inner Circle call with Jimbo. And I was telling him, like, oh, man, and the dude gives birth to himself. I'm like, it's like the greatest movie.
That was on our podcast that you gave it away, not his.
I got it. No, but I was telling him about it. He just thought I was insane when I'm like,
it was a rad movie.
I got to go back and rewatch.
A fantastic movie.
Yeah.
But anyways, all that to say, I mean, so with Harry, I'm not outraged. I haven't heard it, but I get where he's coming from. He's dealing with the reality of how it actually is, where Britain doesn't have the ideal of the First Amendment, largely practices the First Amendment, but has the provisos like you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. So when he hears the ideal, he goes, but wait, that's weird, because how could hate speech be okay? Whereas, and like here, we're actually finding that people there is a sense of retribution for hate speech.
But there also is a sense of people are now creating things and calling things hate speech because you disagree with them. That's a big part of cancel culture.
Oh, big time. Yeah.
So
yeah, that's the weird part of it. And, live by the sword, die by the sword. I think that's what cancel culture is leading to. It's the Ouroboros. It's a snake eating its own tail. It's eating itself. So, yeah.
So what else is going on in your life after that deep discussion?
Did you see my post about my ninja shirts to continue the saga of the ninja pants?
I don't think so.
Oh, yes.
Facebook doesn't think we're friends, so it kind of like doesn't show me your stuff.
It knows that we're too powerful. We're like the two halves of He-Man's sword of power. Right, Skeletor's sword. You're totally Skeletor. I'm totally He-Man.
I'm Skeletor. Great.
You have to be the bad guy. I get to be the good guy. I just
want to be Gargamel.
Gargamel. That was the best when you're kids and they go, gargle smell, and they laugh at, how they'd mock him and tease him. That was pretty rad because I think all of us felt like the Smurfs growing up, and our teachers were totally gargle smell. That's how we felt. But yeah, so it's so funny because I got this package in the mail yesterday, and it's just funny at this age to watch my wife when I go check out my new shirts and I take them out of the package. So I've got the old like action figure picture of Snake Eyes. And then I've got like the old action figure picture on another shirt because I bought two of Storm Shadow, who's the bad ninja. And so she says I can't buy clothes off the internet anymore. She won't go out with me if I wear those. And then Alan Hirsch piped in and goes, I wouldn't go out with you either, Peyton. And I so badly want to say, Alan, I've seen your red jeans. But
I've seen your what jeans?
Your red jeans.
Ooh.
So there's a series of, Alan has some crazy clothes. Like he has purple jeans, he has red jeans, red pants. And I'm like, I want to say this so bad, but I dare not, because if I go out with Alan, I want him to wear the red pants. And so anyways, but he chimed in defense of Andrea. And I, on the other hand, I had more people. I actually had one guy comment and say, I can't believe that I'm actually legitimately disagreeing with Alan Hirsch on anything, but I'm totally with you. The ninja shirts are rad. I need these. So anyways.
Yeah, if Facebook would ever show me your stuff, then I would see that. But
did you play with G.I. Joes as a kid?
Dude, that's a bad memory for me. Look, I must have gotten every bad reject toy that had been returned by a parent because I had the Jeep with the Joe, but it like
no gun.
Like it would just squeak and it wasn't straight.
Oh,
and it
like,
always
did that. So that Jeep wasn't.
Everyone else's was great.
Well, because someone WD-40'd the bottom of it, but that thing always squeaked. If you were raised by a single mom, which I was, and my best friend was, ours squeaked too. But like everyone else's dad would, it was like at the Pinewood Derby, the same pain would repeat every year. Like everyone else's dad would give him like the Mach 5 and you turn up with like chitty chitty bang bang.
Here's just a block of wood, stick some wheels on it and go.
That's so true. The pain. So, we should write a movie about a kid that suffers wounds from the Pinewood Derby and he grows up and he goes too far.
Dude, if you listened to the From Concealment podcast, yet another plug. You would hear Dan has a crazy good movie idea that he wants to produce.
It's not as good as my movie idea, but go ahead.
I got to remember it exactly. It's a youth pastor who's in the woods with his kids. He's been taking them camping. And then there's a bad guy who's out to get them and the kids. And the senior pastor, won't let him, become a senior pastor. He's kind of holding them down, kind of a thing. And all I remember is the bad guy is supposed to be played by Kirk Cameron. And I said, okay, because what started it
is get this funded. Do a Kickstarter for it.
Well, he's trying to get funding this week, actually.
Oh my gosh.
And so what started it was I was like, look, because we're talking about, obviously it's a gun podcast for those of you who don't know what From Concealment means. It's a gun podcast. And I'm like, yeah, the only way you can have, the fun stuff in California, like full auto weapons, is you have to be in the film industry because they're literally exempt from all the California crazy law.
Really?
Yeah. It's like if ever an industry didn't actually need to be exempted, it's the one that makes everything up, but they get to have all the real stuff. And so he's like, oh, dude, here's what we'll do. We'll do this movie so that way you can become, licensed, and then you'll use those firearms for the movie. And therefore you get to have the firearms in California. So that's what started it. So I go, okay, but here's the deal. I want to see, the youth pastor has an assistant who totally doesn't know how to use guns at all. Nothing. Like he can barely pick up a handgun. And I want that to be played by Keanu Reeves. So I think that would like really make it perfect since he's John Wick. And yet in this movie, he's like, I don't know how to use a gun.
Do we have a little person in it?
Maybe the bad guy has an army of little people.
Oh, dude. No,
His whole crew.
Now you're getting too close to my short story.
I think you might be onto something.
Oh, no, don't. See, I can't talk anymore because my short story needs to be made one day.
Do you remember the video that Brandon sent us? Peyton Jones, do I get the job?
It's the best. I treasure it. So, speaking of all this nostalgia and stuff, Brandon Brooks sent me a couple of, I think it was maybe like 6 weeks ago. He sent me a catalog that had, it was like all the Sears catalogs through the years. And you can go on and there's like a facsimile online and you can look through all the stuff you looked at in the Sears catalog. You remember that thing?
I do, actually.
And you can look at all of it and it's a facsimile. Like, it is so dang funny, dude. Like, because you got to go through online, like the suits, the menswear, all the stuff on there. The products, it's funny. It is like going back in a time machine, and it has all the toys too. So, like, I literally remember just ogling that thing, like Ralphie on Toy Story when he's looking through that window, at the Christmas display. Yeah. That was our version of that, and it was pretty rad. So, yeah, he sent me that. He said, dude, get ready to go down a rabbit hole for hours. And I might have spent a little too long on it. So, let's see. It's 10:30.
By the way, I would just like to say that all the Facebook comments on our live stream of this are lit.
Oh, are they? That's funny.
Yeah.
I haven't
Steve Erickson goes into this whole thing about conspiracy theory, where the term comes from, how it was used in a book, how the New York Times is using it. Like, it's just off the chain.
Well, it's definitely being used to gaslight people on almost any conservative right now is called a conspiracy theorist.
Oh, yeah.
Which is funny because I think we just came out of a few years of, the liberals talking about the conspiracy theory with Russian interference. So it's funny to me because to me, we're just Americans. American equals conspiracy theorists. We love like all that tinfoil hat stuff with like the UFO stuff. I did see that this week, and that was funny to me.
That's what I was going to say. The government's coming out. They're finally releasing all their UFO data.
But see, here's the thing. It's the same old, the little silver shiny objects that we've seen forever that we are told is spacecraft. And I'm going to go out on a limb here, but there is no hangar with aliens in it. Obama kind of knocked that on its head. He came out and said, no, there's nothing like that. But there is a place they research this stuff and people do encounter things. But to me, I've got to think that is a natural phenomenon. Just because we're seeing something we don't understand.
I don't know that it's natural. I think a lot of it is probably man-made, and they're just not disclosing what kind of ships they can create now, what kind of air vehicles they can create.
Yeah, I mean, it may be that the guy in the Air Force is like, he's seeing something that's above his pay grade. But I am not thinking it is supernatural. I'm not thinking it is alien technology.
I'm definitely not thinking it's alien. There's no way an alien would come to this planet. I'm sorry.
I'm just thinking, what are they just going to zip around and never mess with us? No, it's to me, it is so funny how quickly people go to aliens on that stuff. And I think so. And these are the same people tell me they can't believe in a God, but they will just boom. They will drop their drawers in a second if they think something's an alien. And I mean, they're intellectual drawers, like just take their pants down right away. Like, it's an alien. Like there's no forethought, no, hey, buy me some dinner first, convince me a little bit. It's just aliens. It's aliens. And you're like, okay, wait a second. So didn't you just lecture me about not being fooled, not being conned, and not believing something? Yeah, I don't buy it anymore. I can't take you serious. So, anyways, hey, now that I'm using inappropriate metaphors, let's go ahead and get into our topic.
Great Scott, it's time for this week's topic.
Let's get down to the nitty gritty.
What was our topic again?
Oh, we're talking the pros and cons of digital.
Oh,
church.
That's right. Yeah.
Digital church. So, well, Pete, what are your thoughts about digital church? I know you have them.
Well, it's a complicated subject. I would say, I would say there's definitely a time and a place, but I would say if you replace your church with digital church, it's not really a church. And I would say that it definitely has benefits. I mean, there are a lot of people who can't go to church. During this whole pandemic, my parents haven't left the house. Literally. They left to go to the doctor and they left to get their COVID shots. That was like the first time they left their house. And so all they've done is digital church. And that's, where they were at. They were just like, hey, we don't want to die, so we're not going out. So I think there's a definite place for it. I mean, before the pandemic, there are a lot of people who were bedridden who couldn't leave. I mean, absolutely. Digital church is great for that. But I would say it's not real church. One of the things that you have talked about for years on this podcast is there's 3 things that you need to happen at church: for us to hear from God, for God to hear from us, and for us to hear from each other. And you kind of take away 2 of those in digital church. And that's why part of me just looks at it and goes, it's not a real church. Like if you're trying to replace your church or even just be like, hey, this is now the church that we're going to do, like so many do. I think it can be a great outreach tool. I think you can still reach people, but I don't think it's church.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to give a little background, I've been really skeptical of digital. No joke, right? Like no secret here if you're new to this podcast. For that very reason. I mean, I was on a panel for Exponential Ventures, which is leaders who they gathered 120 leaders. Some of them were venture capitalists, some were church leaders, others were just kingdom-minded businessmen, and they had 20 people presenting on on some innovative thing they were going to do. And I enjoyed it. It was really cool to hear people really present. Now, I was on the panel. They offered to fly me out there, but travel's hard for me with my daughter. So I was the virtual guy in the room, so I had my little like mouthpieces. They'd be like, Peyton's not here. He's a virtual panelist, but he's asking this question. And so I would text these guys. They would present, and then they had the panelists, what they called the expert panelists. And then they would have.
So you were just a panelist. You weren't the expert panelist.
I was on the expert panel.
Okay, you were on the. Okay, I thought they were trying to make a distinction there.
Briscoe was on there. Bill Kokenauer was on there. Jeff Reed from Fidgetal was on there. And then I'm trying to remember who the other guy was. I don't know that I knew the other guy. Other guy, if you're listening and I just forgot, I'm sorry.
Other guy. We'll just call you other guy.
Other guy, sorry. So, but then there was a panel of 5 sharks, and like Ed Love was on there and a few other, and it was pretty fun because I think I belonged on the shark panel because I was more asking like the different. So like one guy presented like Roblox church, and right away I'm thinking, how you keep the pedos out, So that was and they did not disclose me for that one, but my thing. Like I had more sharky shirt.
What is Roblox Church? I don't understand.
So Roblox is kind of like Minecraft. It's like this big open world where people create their own games, and like my girls play it. And
so it's the game, yeah. Because my son has told me about it. I don't know what it is, but
yeah. So it's I'm just laughing at my daughters when we've created characters for them. But sometimes we will all play Roblox together on a weekend just for fun because that's what they want to do. And it's all kinds of lame Roblox. But apparently there's a bunch of churches in there. And this guy, he's interacting with like 50,000 kids. And it's youth led, but I mean, I have all kinds of concerns about that, as I think any parent would, like, hey, what's going on in there, but but also I'm not knocking it. Like, it may be a great way to reach young people. I'm not putting any judgment on it. And I want to be careful because when people are innovating in digital space right now, it's kind of like being an astronaut, except it's not cool, right? Like, an astronaut goes out into space and everybody thinks it's awesome, right? Like, nobody being in space is not like being on Earth. Nobody criticizes an astronaut. The astronaut just gets like, wow, everybody else wants to be an astronaut. Well, the digital space guys are, they're trying to innovate and pioneer. So let me give a little bit of history of what's happened with me. So I'm on that panel, I'm watching, and there's everything from gamer church to, you name it. It was presented. There was a lot of Bible presentations. But at the end of the day, a little bit before that, for Plantology, I was invited onto a panel for digital church. It was a digital church panel for a denominations, for the RCA. And I sat there with these other people that are launching digital church and all this stuff. And I'm sitting on there thinking, I'm like the least qualified guy to be on here, number one. And number two, I'm not sure I agree with this. But by the end of that summit, and it was only like 2 hours long, I think, I'm on this panel. And I felt at the end like I was here to learn. I definitely wasn't here to give my opinion. But I could see huge potential for reaching people. And so here's where I've kind of come to think about it. Number one, digital church, like you said, is going to be a tough sell, because people are not right now ready, I don't think, particularly in the pandemic, to say, hey, we're going to ditch all physical aspects of church. Like, for example, in the Roblox church, they talked about taking communion. People, another guy came and was saying, hey, we have avatars. We appear with our avatars. They would argue that body language, facial expressions, all that communicate through everything you could communicate live. Their avatar lays hands on another avatar. They take communion. They would say they sit at home and take bread and wine. And then in the digital space, their character is also doing that, because it's almost like VR. That's what it was. It was a VR church. One of them was a VR church. And they were arguing that the pandemic actually has helped. It's added another dimension to it. And I got what they were saying. But for me personally, I'll just be real. I don't see it replacing physical church either. But
I think it's more than just replacing it. I don't think it should replace it.
Correct. So here's where I came to see, for an outreach tool, this is the space. Like, this is NASA, because they're connecting with people. And, I played World of Warcraft when I lived in Europe, and that happens a lot less these days. But the fact of the matter is, the fact of the matter is, I have not been able to, sorry, I'm getting this repeated phone call that's going to be problematic for me in a minute here. I got to deal with this real quick.
It's your old plumber, isn't it?
No, it's actually my, hold on one sec. You work for me. There they go again. They're calling again. So anyways, hey Siri. No, never mind. It's still ringing. So,
now everyone's Siri just went off.
What do you want? Send Peyton $50. So there we go. So anyways, so for me, like, this is the space, the final frontier, right? If you're in the digital world, for me, as I sat on that panel, I agree with you. Like, I can't bring myself to think this is going to be church, the new form of church. I just can't get there. I think that there are things like sitting in a circle, face to face, group dynamics that when I'm on a digital avatar, it cannot replace. And I know there'd be advocates, and I still need to fully hear their arguments, but I can't. For years now, the incarnational people have been selling us, hey, incarnate. That even sitting in a room with, thousands of other people, they've been saying that's not it. You need to be in a small group. You need to be incarnational. You need to be known, seen, heard, felt. Like, all these things are important. All of the tactile expressions of humanity need to be. That's what the incarnation was, right? If God spoke through his avatars, the prophets, it's kind of the argument of Hebrews, but in these last days, God sent his son, right? That is the theology of the incarnation, that God himself came, that it wasn't good enough to be speaking through prophets, which, let's be honest, that's like an avatar, right? God is speaking through somebody else. He wanted to come himself. So I think there's a lot of incarnational theology that perhaps maybe covers the weakness of the digital approach, but I see it as a tier 1 and tier 2. So when you come onto my property, you are in my front yard, right? But you're not in my house yet. So a tier 1, tier 2 style of evangelism, we've talked about this. I am now beginning to see the digital space as an incredibly powerful tier 1 that I've been neglecting, to be honest. Like, I could turn around right now. Like, I work for Through the Word, which, dude, we're like over 200,000 daily listens through this Bible app, and we're growing. Like,
if we could just get 10% of that for this podcast, we'd be lit,
right? But here's the amazing thing is, like, every day we're building a discipleship tool through it right now that's just going to be epic, and it's going to go global. But it literally, to me, is this amazing. Like, I'm rethinking, like, Lord, I don't. Like, I could literally, it's what an evangelist does. You're just reaching tons and tons of people. Can a shepherd function digital? For sure. So when I was playing the MMO, before I got interrupted here, I was starting to share in Europe. I played World of Warcraft, and I was in a European guild. A guild is like a group that decides, hey, we'll go do a dungeon or a raid or whatever. And it's a bunch of people, and there could be hundreds, could be thousands in your guild. And I remember when it came out that I was a pastor, the guild master, so geeky, I know I'm a total nerd and proud, but he was like, hey man, you're a minister, so-and-so just texted me, because you start forming like strong community. He's like, hey, I know you're a pastor. Can you talk to this guy over here? Now, this guy would never, ever go to church, but he'll talk to me about being suicidal. And so I kind of became like the unofficial chaplain for this guild. And that's what the guy, the guild master would say, well, Jonesy's our chaplain here. If you got any problems, go talk to him. And that was how I functioned and served. I'd go kill snowbolts, and then I'd also share the gospel, and I would build these rad relationships.
I understood 10 words in that analogy.
Snowbolts don't exist. I made those up.
Okay.
But there is something called a kobold, but it's just funnier for me to make up words. But the amazing grasp on TikTok and, Instagram, all these different things, Snapchat, people that are on there that, there's the whole idea of being an influencer nowadays. And to me, I think that's lame as a minister. Wanting to be an influencer for yourself is just about the stupidest, lamest thing but to be an influencer for Christ, to be someone on there who harnesses that for evangelism, becomes a presence on one of these platforms to talk to people that are just searching. I'm beginning to really open up to that and really think about that. And I'm probably way late to that party, because it's not like I've never thought about this before, but I'm starting to see, as people have donned their astronaut suits and jumped out there, people have done it. People have really started to go out and explore and check it out and chart new regions. And I'm like, man, this is awesome. This is exciting to me because there's no limits on this. I mean, we saw Bonehead get up there a few months back and, say Jesus was a racist and he got, corrected. There was a guy on TikTok. He's, I think he was somebody's, youth pastor, but he got on there and he was trying to say how like the Phoenician woman corrected Jesus, and his racism and it was ridiculous. So with all of this, what the reformers understood was as soon as you open up the word of God as a tool to the masses, you also open up a world of heresy. And that was, the Catholic Church thing was we have to protect doctrine. So we're not going to give the scripture to everybody because they understood. The reformers said, we got to take that risk. They understood the risk, but they negotiated the risk and they embraced it and said, well, that's what we're here for. So, as many boneheads as you're going to have on there spreading heresy, you're also going to have people up there sharing the true gospel. And so there's just a world of opportunity, but will it replace? And this is going back to that panel. One of the things that became really interesting to me was there was a guy on there and he said, to me, and he was this kind of middle road. He talked about all the ways that they were innovating in that space. But he said, I see myself in the ministry that I do, because he was an influencer in digital spaces. He said, I see myself, because he was also a pastor. I see myself as the link between the two worlds, because everything we do in digital space has a connection to a church on the ground. Our goal is always to move people into a local church. And I felt like he had a real good balance. And again, the more I'm listening to people that are innovating, and I'm not the expert on this by any means, the more I'm listening to people, I'm going, okay, there is a neglected world here. It's not an either or. This could be a both and. Digital church, perhaps, is maybe not a good way to put it.
Right.
Even though I'm working with someone who is launching a digital church, it'll be interesting to kind of track with him and see what he learns and because he read church plantology and said to me, hey, I'm not sure. I'm convinced by everything you're saying in church plantology. I'm just not convinced it fits my model of what I'm doing. And I want to talk to you about that and explore that with you and see, does it Cha-ching. Thank you, sir. I missed that opportunity. But he wanted to explore it. And I was like, hey, more than happy to, because I'm ignorant. Let's talk about it. Let's explore it together. So I'm not going to come out and crap all over it, but I'm not convinced yet of, that digital church is the best way. I mean, almost everybody's digital church right now, because of the pandemic. But does it have major weaknesses and flaws? Yes. And limitations. But does it have enormous potential? More potential right now, I think, than I ever thought before. Like, that's super exciting to me, is how we can start really influencing the world through digital space.
How do you put all of your audios from your sermons on your website if digital church? I mean, we're not going to be sending people to YouTube. We're not going to be sending them to Facebook.
Well, my friend,
I'm trying to set you up. Can you pick up what I'm throwing down?
Yeah. Well, I use something called Sermon Boss, Pete. And Sermon Boss. Sermonboss.com. Sermon Boss, Pete, is a place that helps me keep all of my sermons, my podcasts, everything all on my webpage. In other words, when people come to my webpage, normally it's like Cape Canaveral, right? They hop on a rocket and they shoot over to YouTube, or they shoot over to wherever my podcast is. But Sermon Boss helps you keep everything on your page, Pete. Sermonboss.com. Head on over there today and tell them Pete and Peyton sent you. And while you're doing all that while you're doing all that sermon bossing around, you need, Pete, to go to Simplify Church, because once Sermon Boss has bossed your sermons, you need to simplify your church, dang it. And you can only do that by going to simplifychurch.com.
Love it. I love it.
Yeah, that's all you get. So, hey, it's time for us to go. Happy trails. Sayonara. Thanks for joining the podcast today. If you want to go, if you want to reach The ones nobody's reaching need to go digital, baby. No, need to go where nobody's going and do what nobody's doing. And that's what we've been talking about today. So thanks for joining us. I'm Peyton Jones, and this has been Pete Mitchell. And hey, share, like, subscribe. We never tell you to do that stuff. So, but do it. Wouldn't hurt.
And what's that one? Patreon, and give you a Patreon or
we don't have a Patreon.
I know.
We should have one of those.
Why? So we could look at it and no one wants to give us money.
I know. You know what? Hey, all of these podcasts have Patreons. I found myself thinking this week, we should probably have a Patreon. People might want to pay this for it sometimes.
I don't think our listeners would give.
You cheapskate church planners. No, the fact is, we know you guys, most of you don't have money. But those of you that are Bivo and you're like making the big dollars now, hey, you know what I'm talking about. Hey, do this. Set us up a Patreon account and advertise it for us, run it for us, and then send us money out of it.
That would be right. There you go.
That's what I'm talking about. All right. See you guys later.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for another weekly episode of the Church Planner Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Peyton Jones. We'd love to hear your comments on this episode of the Church Planner Podcast. Visit us online and let us know what you thought at churchplannerpodcast.com. If you subscribe to us via iTunes and have enjoyed the podcast, leave us a positive review. The more positive reviews we receive in iTunes, the more iTunes will promote us to other church planners who would benefit from this show. This podcast is brought to you by the Church Planner Magazine, which is available in the iTunes newsstand or online via churchplannermagazine.com.